I just finished watching Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 2, and I need to vent because that sucked. Like, genuinely, I'm disappointed, and that's not me hating for the sake of it, because I love this show and it's one of my favorite series of all time, which is exactly why this feels so frustrating to watch. This might be one of the most underwhelming stretches of Stranger Things we've ever had, possibly the weakest run of episodes the show has produced, and that hurts to say because this show used to be special. It used to feel focused and confident, and now it feels like it's actively losing the plot in its final season, to the point where I'm genuinely worried we're heading toward a bad ending. The biggest issue for me is inconsistency, because nothing feels grounded anymore, nothing feels earned, and everything just sort of happens because the story needs it to, not because it makes sense within the world.
Let's start with Elle. In Volume 1 of Season 5, Elle is suddenly talking like Season 1 Elle again, broken English, short sentences, childlike delivery, which is fine, cool, and actually on par with her character and consistent with her past. But then, in Volume 2, there's a scene with her and Hopper arguing, and she's suddenly speaking fluent English, full sentences, emotional nuance, fully articulate, and it completely throws you off because the shift is so obvious that you immediately notice it and you start asking yourself which version of Elle we're supposed to be watching. What makes it worse is that later on she randomly switches straight back to broken English again, which doesn't feel like character progression or regression. It just feels messy. Like there was no clear decision made about who Elle is meant to be from scene to scene. Like I just mentioned, it's especially noticeable in the scenes where Elle and Hopper are talking because Millie Bobby Brown completely drops Elle and just talks like herself, with no hesitation, no speech pattern, and no trace of the character, which isn't Elle, that's an actor stepping out of the role. And this is a recurring problem across the season. Jonathan looks about 40 years old at this point, and I'm sorry, but what have Joyce and Jonathan actually done this entire season? Because when you really think about it, they barely contribute anything meaningful and feel like they're only there because the show doesn't know how to move on from them. Then you've got the upside down. Why are characters casually strolling through it now? And since when has this place ever been safe enough for a light jog and a calm conversation? Because this used to be a nightmare dimension where every second felt dangerous. The tentacles of the hive mind have just stopped moving for no clear reason, which completely kills the sense of threat. And on top of that, there's random dark matter sitting on Hawkins' lab that's never been established before, meaning the rules of the upside down now change scene by scene depending entirely on what the plot needs at that moment.
And don't even get me started on Max. She's blind, then she's not blind, then she's weak, then she's fine, then she dies, then she doesn't, and none of it feels consistent, earned, or emotionally impactful because the show keeps undoing its own consequences. And then somehow everyone just finds each other immediately. They find Max, they find Elle, they find Will, and then suddenly everyone is back together in the hospital basement like it's nothing. Come on. There were army personnel in there literally seconds earlier, and then Scooby Doo style, they all run in and reunite. No complications, no setbacks, no real sense of urgency or cost. Everything just feels way too smooth. Stranger Things used to thrive on mayhem and fear, where plans went wrong and people paid the price. But now it feels like Google Maps storytelling, where everyone arrives exactly where they need to be without resistance. The show also feels absolutely terrified to take anyone out because there are multiple moments where characters logically should have died and they just don't, with no explanation and no fallout, which completely removes the stakes. Because of that, the whole thing starts to feel like a soap opera. And speaking of soap opera, that Will scene, I'm sorry, but that scene did not need to be 10 minutes long, and I get that it's an important subject. I'm not denying that. But the world is ending tonight. There are literal monsters in collapsing dimensions, and the story grinds to a halt for an extended emotional monologue that adds nothing to the plot and completely kills the pacing. This isn't an isolated issue either, because the show clearly tries to force multiple emotional moments in this volume. Nancy and Jonathan, Max and Holly, Will's storyline, but none of them land the way they're supposed to. And instead of feeling powerful, they feel exaggerated and hollow, almost like the show is chasing award-worthy scenes rather than letting emotion come naturally. This show was never about tackling every social issue. It avoided politics. It avoided racism, even though it was set in the 80s. It avoided heavy messaging on purpose. And that's exactly why it worked, because it was an escape built around monsters, bikes, friendship, and fear. Now it feels like it's trying to win awards. Long emotional pauses, overwritten dialogue, Characters constantly talking about their feelings, and so many scenes where nothing actually happens except people explaining how they feel about each other. It's Scooby-Doo level corny at times, with quips every 5 minutes, Marvel-style dialogue, and characters constantly finishing each other's sentences during these so-called plans. Every episode feels like the same cycle. Someone explains a plan, someone says it's crazy, someone says it won't work, someone insists it has to, and then we move on over and over again. And then there's the side characters, because there are way too many of them, and I genuinely don't understand why Holly is getting this much screen time at the expense of the main cast, what it adds to the story, or why we're even here when core characters feel underused. And the ending just makes everything worse. We're back at square one. Holly is still missing. Vecna is fine. The kids are scattered again. And after all that runtime, nothing has actually changed. Nothing. And one last thing, because this genuinely made me laugh, Holly wearing Under Armour, a brand founded in 1996 in the 80s, which just perfectly sums up how careless the attention to detail has become. I love this show, which is exactly why this annoys me so much, because watching one of the best shows of the last decade slowly get undone by its own writers in its final season is genuinely painful.